Greetings in the energy of a Batari. All that is good and great, all that is blessed and beautiful, all that is creative and conscious, and all that is positive and possible. May all your blessings be deep and wide as the skies above, and all good things be never ending. Hotep, I am Adisa Olobayo Bankole, your host to Mindvibes, Thoughts from a Curious Mind, a bi-monthly podcast series exploring and examining social phenomena then and now. Now, in this episode of Mindvibes, I will be continuing my exploration and examining of the identity crisis within the Black community. And I've entitled this, The Disorientations of Identity, the Psychology of Cultural Centering, Reclaiming Agency. Now, before we begin, hit that like button, subscribe, share, and leave a comment. Again, the disorientation of identity, the psychology of cultural centering, reclaiming agency. Quote unquote, at 7 years of age, you're told it enough, you believe it. You believe the hatred, you live it, you breathe it, you marry it. Mrs. Pell in the film Mississippi Burning. Now, in my podcast series, Mindvibes, I did a piece entitled The Quest for Identity. And there I was dealing with the excuses many African Americans have with their rebirthing process with changing their colonized names to reclaiming their African cultural names and restoring their rightful name that was stolen from them. Yes, there are many and varied reasons or excuses we come up with regarding why we cannot move in that direction of cultural liberation through our renaming process, many of which I have discussed not only in my first chapter of my piece, The Arc of Humanity, but again in my Mindvibes podcast series I mentioned above. Yet, with all that I had laid out, perhaps I have failed to deal with the very real psychological reality about making this change. So in this piece, I have entitled The Disorientation of Identity, the Psychology of Cultural Centering, Reclaiming Agency. A long title, I know, but I want to deal with the psychology of this journey and how we need to really deal with what this transformation is and does. More to the point, how can we come up with a guide to assist with that transformation? A layman's guide, if you will, the ABCs of how we go about taking these steps. Now, I am not a psychologist or a sociologist or even a scholar. I cannot offer any real definitive expose on this matter. But what I will offer is my humble opinion on this topic. A subject matter that has and will continue to have a profound effect on the lives of people descending from the African culture and its people. How do we reclaim something that has been stolen from us for so long? Where do we go to assert this claim? And what are the consequences, both real and imagined, with these questions these are the questions that need to be looked at more closely by African descendant scholars throughout the African diaspora. We really need to examine what we go through psychologically and what does that mean to the individual who is taking that journey. I will give again my take on what I believe to be the roadblocks to this change. And although I have demonstrated the excuses or the perceived realities to this change. I feel that there is a real psychological component to this hesitancy in our request for an identity. There is a real or perceived mental anguish that takes place in making this journey and the metamorphosis that we are undergoing when taking these steps. I believe fear of the unknown plays a huge part with this transformation, leaving from a space that is well known that has become our comfort zone. And as Miss Cassandra Wilson sings, quote unquote, loving was so easy when instinctively we knew. Now everything has changed, stumbling through the pains of something powerful and new without a clue. Because I don't think, nor have I come across any materials written on how we should engage in this transformation, this reclamation process. We don't have the necessary tools to deal with this brand new path we are embarking on. And because of this, we, for the most part, are stumbling in that cultural black hole of not seeing the beauty of this conversion nor the necessity for it. This is mostly because we don't have a real clear picture of what culture means or why it remains important for human beings. We are often given a cursory inclination as to what and the why of cultural reality. So now, let me lay out my essential points as to why this psychological quest for African descendants brings so much consternation and fear, besides what I have previously stated. And they are: 1. Fear of the unknown. Moving into a territory that is a different cultural terrain than what we are used to. Because what we have been in, what we have grown into, no matter the colonizer, is that world we are familiar with. Never mind the psychological and cultural damage that is being inflicted upon us. No matter who is the colonizer, if you are embedded in that paradigm, just like in the white pedagogy, and you grow up in this country, America is whiteness, the names and everything, we're comfortable with. We just don't see the need to change. 2, we are dealing with a sort of cultural fragility, almost like Robin DiAngelo's white fragility. We defend the indefensible of why many of us remain captured in the mindset of the colonizer, why his name becomes relevant to us. Not the idea that the name is connected to something or someone, but that it has become like an old rocking chair. It's comfortable, So that's why, again, in my quest for identity, I deal with all the iterations of why many blacks won't move beyond their names, their English names, Third, it is always difficult to make a journey, particularly when you feel you're not equipped to handle such a feat, that you will be psychologically and emotionally inadequate to deal with the onslaught coming your way, especially from your family. That you will be made to defend your position even though many members of your family will not or cannot accept your response, although your response will be solid. Because for them, they have invested in this fiction given to them by the usurpers of cultures, but also This change is an abhorrent thing that you are doing to the family name and what it, quote unquote, means. Somehow or another, you are desecrating the family and all it stands for. And again, just go back to my quest for identity, and I will, and there I explain all the, again, iterations of that. The fourth, the anxiety, however, real or perceived, there is a tremendous effort that you have to deal with, not only the real and physical condition, i.e. family, but yourself. How do you see yourself? What is it going to look like in the end? Human beings are by nature visual. We tend to like to see what unfolds with that transformation. That is why faith tends to be, to many, a visionist concept, but not one rooted in logic or tangibility. It is what we can see, what we can touch, yet this transformation, this move to our cultural reality is a psychological cultural conscious development, one that does not always have, to a degree, a solid, tangible thing. It is what this development means to you as a cultural being. It is with this idea that I am depositing, in which I am giving reason to what I believe outside of my piece Quest for Identity is focusing on. Here again, I was focusing on, again, of the outspoken rationale for denying this identity transformation. However, here, I'm injecting a mental and emotional reason to why there is a reluctance with many in the African diaspora to their inability to make that change. Again, for many, this cultural metamorphosis is a very scary and stupendous undertaking to move from what you believe is your cultural grounding, however, albeit a colonized one. The question that one needs to ask is what the cost is and or the benefits in both remaining in a colonial state of mind or moving into a more liberating consciousness by reclaiming your rightful cultural heritage. How does one maintain a positive appreciation to and for a conqueror of cultures and remain loyal to that? How does one do that? That's in a culturally conscious sense, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make common sense. Perhaps, and this is just my thoughts on it, perhaps it is a form we know as the Stockholm Syndrome, where the victim of the abuser identifies with the abuser because they see the abuser as being powerful. This is the case in a lot of times with wives who are abused by their husband. They still they don't press charges in that because they tend to align with him because they see him as powerful. It is a way of breaking down their defense and making them wholly, his to control. Here in this case with the African descendants, to continue to wear the name and attributes of the conqueror is much easier to do because we somehow feel an affinity to that power structure, or we have become so attached to it that we cannot see what is continuing to happen to us. Now, the opening quote is taken from the film Mississippi Burning, where again, Mrs. Pell says, who is the sheriff's wife, quote unquote, at 7 years of age, you're told it enough, you believe it, you believe the hatred, you live it, you breathe it, you marry it. And although here she was describing the racism that she was taught, however, here we can use the same analogy for what this identity crisis within our cultural community is doing to our people. The fact that we have become so identified with the Euro-American structure and paradigm that the idea of renewing our own cultural construct becomes sacrilegious. Again, in dealing with the battered woman, she doesn't see herself as a fully whole human being with a whole her whole character intact, her whole personality. She always aligning with the husband or the partner that is the abuser, because it's that fear, it's that need to belong to something, and that's what's happened to many African Americans. It's that need to belong to something, and that something is the colonizer. We are, if we are able to grow, to have to develop a cohesive and coherent guide to reclaiming our cultural selves through the reformation of our names and restoring our true humanness, so that we can continue to thrive and develop as full participants in this human epic. We as African people and those out of the academy, especially those of us who are Afrocentrics, must create for ourselves and those who desire to go down that cultural road a systematic workbook on how to meander through the psychological trauma that will surely come with this change. Although it may seem a trivial thing I am dealing with, but I truly believe in many of our people, if many of our people could have what Molefi Asante described when he wrote Afrocentricity as a lover's book, then perhaps we would have been further along with this cultural reformation. What we then need is to apply this sentimentality, a lover's guide to this process, since we are dealing with our people's mentality. We need to create a guide, a how-to book with very simple terminology, an ABC of how one makes that transformation and what will be the outcome of this cultural metamorphosis. What will we gain in the end? Even if we look at the African continent, we see many Africans taking on the names of the European Christian characters from the Bible or other names they have been given. And although their culture was not entirely wiped out, they too suffer from this identity malaise that we here in America suffer from, as well as throughout the African diaspora. Again, as I have stated in 2 other episodes of Mindvibes, when dealing with a search for culture and a quest for identity, I made clear that when you are moved, as Molefi rightly presents, from your cultural agency, you lose any real humanity. Because identity, as Naeem Akbar states, when he deals with the confusion about our condition, doesn't change the condition. It is essential. If we are confused about our cultural identity, then we lack any real responsibility to come to the human table with other cultural beings, to define and to pursue a more humane society. There will be no respect by other cultural beings to us until we give that respect to ourselves. And that way we can join the human family in presenting what we believe can be a part of a utopic society. Now again, this is my continuing episode with my culture and our issues that we have. But until next time, hit that like button, share, subscribe, leave a comment. Until next episode, this is the Decentering Biobank saying, may we all continue to strive to bend the arc of justice towards humanity and believe that peace and love can be achieved. Asante Sana.